So it's often said in comedy circles all over the world that there's too much censorship in comedy. There's too much cancelling going on. There's too much of the kind of the hammerlock of social control placed upon comedians and comic creators and comic writers. And I've been in the writing sphere of things for many years, and I'm obviously a consumer of comedy and British comedy in particular. What we have in Britain, or what we've traditionally had in Britain, is some of the craziest comedy on the face of the earth. Like we really do. Like if you're a comedian and you've got integrity, you can get away with anything. You really, really can. Like as I said before in another video on this topic, I'm a great fan of David Firth and his animations. And one of his animations is Spoilsbury Toast Boy. There is a part in it where there is an old woman tied to a rocking chair, getting anally penetrated, raped by a giant beetle, and the beetle says, so Spoilsbury Toast Boy is like this little kid in the video, like, little boy, come and join us, yes, and it's like among like the strangest, creepiest, most fucked up shit you could possibly imagine. So like, yeah, if you're a comic creator, like David Firth doesn't have to get taken to court under censorship laws, because like censorship laws apply to things like pornography. Like we've got to have censorship laws, obviously. You can't have child pornography, or you can't really have anything that's like pretending like to be child pornography, if you know what I mean. You can't have, like, we banned age play now as of 2026, so we can't have adult baby porn. Like, I don't know, like maybe that is a step too far. Like maybe between consenting adults, but then again, like how far away is adult baby porn from people genuinely thinking about, or age play of any kind, like how far away is that from people genuinely having thoughts about having sex with kids? It's a little bit, it does sort of make one wonder, doesn't it, really, I think. But yeah, we've banned that now. And like, for instance, I wrote this book called Sergeant Arson, in which Arson, this big fat bald corrupt police officer, and it's set in the 90s, is subject to acts of brutal, depraved sexual sadism by a group of women. And part of what they do is they film obscene pornography with him as the star character in the pornography, and he's constantly twisted on hallucinogens, so like he remembers none of it, and they use electric shock therapy to wipe his memory after each time they perform these horrifying sex acts on him. And at one point in it, he's dressed as a baby. That's what they start with. They start with adult baby, and it's this grand arc from innocence to experience. And yeah, he's depicted in like these like depraved sexual situations, so they can downline stitch up him or stitch up his boss Nigel Cleaver in the story. And but like Sergeant Arson is a comedy. It's a comedy book. It's not actually porn. It's not like, it doesn't like, well, I suppose it depicts sex acts, but I mean, I think it has literary merit. That's the thing. I mean, some people might say it doesn't have any literary merit and like it's not that good, but at least some people find it good, I think. I thought it was worth publishing anyway, but nothing came of it. I never got punished under indecency laws or anything like this. But yeah, I think the humour in it, apart from the sexual sadism, which I mean some people might find funny, which I hope they indeed do in the fullness of time. There's this whole sort of like convoluted crime and corruption plot, and very unclear whether Arson is the villain or an anti-hero or a hero, and sort of blurring the lines between hero and villain very much with Sergeant Arson, because he's trying to stitch up Nigel Cleaver, who's his boss, who destroyed voice recordings from 2 murdered sex workers back in about 10 years prior to when the story begins. They get murdered by the son of a superintendent, and Nigel Cleaver burns their voice recordings of this superintendent's son, who was getting indicted for major crimes, and and the investigation fizzled out due to lack of evidence and so on, because Cleaver destroyed the evidence without giving too much away about the story, But so Arson's playing the long game with Nigel Cleaver, trying to stitch him up for gross misconduct, and all sorts of wacky, weird, funny shit happens in Sergeant Arson, which isn't of a sexual nature. So I wouldn't have said it's even erotica. It's more like something more like what's like any sort of humorous movie that depicts wild sexual situations. I mean, Pulp Fiction, for instance, includes a rape scene, a gay rape scene happening in the basement of a shop. That's allowed. That's not indecency. Lolita isn't indecency, and that depicts the grooming of a child. But so we can't ban books like that. We can't ban literature. We can ban pornography, but it's always a fine line, isn't it, that we draw between what counts as legal erotica, what counts as porn, and like for instance, you might say that something like 120 Days of Sodom, which I've never read, but which I hear is grotesque. People say that has literary merit, even though what Desard produced was, in essence, like a rough first draft of this this unbelievable book, this nightmare story, this nightmare fueled book. But I mean, and also what I've also created is something called Behemoth, which is my latest novel. That'll be coming out soon, hopefully, and I'll get that printed up and sent out to people who want to read it. It depicts like extreme horror, extreme violence in it, and there's a deep like nudity element to some of it, and exhibitionism on the part of this character called Alistair Foyle, who is one of the most evil creations in fiction, I would contend. And it puts Leo in a horrifying. Leo Corcoran is another character in this. He captures him, puts him in a little bear costume, subjects him to endless repeats of countdown, and because he's a mathematician, he does this to people, keeps him alive by feeding him sherbet lemons while constantly offering him skin to eat, because Alice Foyle skins people alive and eats their skin, and he's like, would you like some skin? Like, would you like a sherbet lemon? He's a little old man, horrible little old doctor, tiny, skinny, little horrible creature with completely naked with a cape made of skin, and goes around, naked with his little bean hanging out, his horrible little biscuit dangling around. Oh, it is nightmare fuel, but it makes me laugh anyway. It's made other people laugh, and I've told them about it. It makes a certain sort of person with a certain sense of humour laugh, this sort of thing. So I felt like right with myself doing it. I felt like I should have written it, and I think it does have literary merit. It at least pushes literary boundaries of acceptability and good taste in literature, and and art in general, literary arts, because I think we need to have an avant-garde, don't we? We need like people to be on the frontiers of things, rather than just like making everything fucking conventional and the same formulaic shit just being regurgitated throughout the system. And something like being unpopular doesn't mean it lacks merit. That's very important also to recognise. Doesn't mean that it's not an important book on some level. If it's doing something new and original, and it's pushing boundaries, I would defend always the merit of something like that, and that's indeed what I wanted to do as a writer and artist. Not just to craft porn, or erotica. Really, I'm not really interested in writing erotica so much. But I mean, you'll have sex scenes, haven't you, in literature? Because literature should reflect real life, or aspects of real life, or aspects of fantasy life as well. And like, yeah, it should do all sorts of things. You know, it should really, in literature, so anything should be possible. But if it, for instance, depicts exploitative, well, I mean, then we're back with 120 Days of Sodom, aren't we? Which does all those horrendous things. But like, to what extent was that erotica or pornography? It's debatable, isn't it? You know, it's a question as to whether or not like de Sade's work, maybe because it was old, you know, like stood up to scrutiny eventually after having been unanimously banned for most of its history, you know, until it was eventually published. I think the early 20th century by daring French publishing houses and people like this, and yeah, made its worm its way eventually into the literary market. And you know, for a lot of people, like what I've written, Sergeant Arson would be too shocking. You know, for a lot of people with quite beige tastes, I think, like quite bland sensibilities, you know, it would be deemed obscene, just like David Firth's work would be, with the beetle raping the little old woman tied to a rocking chair. And the other like horrifying things he depicts in his nightmare fuel videos. But yeah, like I think there has to be a market for these sorts of things. You know, we have to have black comedy. I think dark humor. I'm a dark humorist. That's how I like to think. That's how I like to think of myself. I think that's an accurate reflection of what I am. You know, I write lovely things as well. I write you know things which strive for beauty, yeah, also, and pathos and charm also. I don't just write about horrors, but I think it's important to write about the horrendous things in with satirical overtones. And yeah, I think we can't lose satire. Also, it's a very important part of art and comedy. If comedy is supposed to be just bland and beige and surface level, and you know, just you know, the populist mainstream of comedy, if that's the only thing we can do on stage, then it's not really worth it, in my opinion. You should be able to say anything on stage. I mean, if it's like a real incitement to religious and racial hatred or something, then you know you shouldn't be able to, maybe. But yeah, I don't like that. That's the difference. I think like if you're saying something on stage, like implying that like all Muslims are bad or something like this, and it's in really poor taste, and you seem like you mean it, and you're not doing an impression of another character who does mean it or something like this, then you are just trying to stir up hatred. You know, and on a level like certain comedians probably should be cancelled for that reason, but it's a tough line to walk. It really is. But integrity is the key, I think. Having that, you know, whether or not you can defend your own actions as a creative, as an artist, and whether or not what you do has merit. If it says something original and interesting and insightful, then it should be allowed to stay, I think. Yeah, but you know, I mean, yeah, even shock humour, like which is, well, I mean, all humour relies on shock to some extent, or at least relies on surprise. You have to the punchline of a joke. If you know it already, it's not funny, is it? Like the punchline of a joke works only because you're surprised by it. Do you see? Or like if you should have known it already, but you didn't, so it creates a sort of a shock to you, a surprise that you hadn't thought of that. So yeah, there's this sort of elegant dance of humour where you have the setup, then the punchline, and the punchline seems to come out of nowhere, and you're surprised you react by laughing. That's roughly how humour works. Yeah, and shock humour, like saying shocking things in humour, loads of comedy does that. That shouldn't be outlawed ever. Like David Firth's humour, a lot of it is shock humour. It's saying shocking things, and because they're so shocking, the only proper response is to laugh at them, or you could just get offended by it. And like comedians, like real comedians, like don't get offended by the dark materials. We just crack up because that's our instinct for some of like the most brutal shit out there. But like that's what I love doing. Yeah, I love that stuff. I think it's some of the best stuff. I think it's the best stuff, basically. Brutal comedy. I love it. But not everyone does. But it should never be banned. And that is an issue of the freedom of expression. If we were to ever like try and ban that sort of stuff. So no, like it shouldn't be all like acceptable, inoffensive, bland, mainstream shit. We'll have weird, crazy, dark, disturbing, dark element to comedy. That has to remain. Because, comedy has a dark side, and that is a legitimate part of comedy. And, even mainstream comedians will venture into the darkness from time to time. But, yeah, it is what it is. It must remain, I submit. It's some of the best stuff out there. So thank you for watching. I'll see you soon. Love you, love.